Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host, producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, everyone wants to know, now that you're back from Indianapolis, did you run the 40 again this year, and was your time better?
I did not run the 40 this year because I guess I can only run it with a partner, and that partner is Mark Schofield, and he wasn't there. I guess that's what I found out about myself.
That's what you found out about yourself?
Yeah, that's the one thing I found out about myself in Indianapolis. I learned nothing else about me, despite having been up at 4:30 a.m. several nights in a row, with varying degrees of sobriety involved. No introspection, all gas, no brakes. I did not run a 40. But I do want to say I stand on my original combine time. I feel like I went out there and I competed. I did what I thought was representative of my capabilities, which, again, according to the flawed electronic timing data, is a 4.54 somehow.
That's still some Florida 2000 math, but yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I fear that if I run a 4.54 one year and run a 6-second 40 the next year, that perhaps someone will question the original 4.54, and we can't have that.
I just think it's important that you learn the power of friendship based on the fact that you wouldn't do it without him.
Okay, remember, I didn't say friend. Let's be clear. Often in our life, we have antagonists that push us to do things that we rather would not want to do or would not have done. And that doesn't make them our friends. And in many cases, makes them our enemies.
So that's what you're going with? You didn't learn the power of friendship more than you learned the power of enemyship?
Yeah.
Frenemyship?
If I were to be a Nickelodeon cartoon, I think that would be kind of one of the guiding themes, right? Avatar, a lot of friends, a lot of power through friendship, a lot of growth and development. Here, no growth, no development. You only get worse, actually.
Yeah, the story of Indianapolis.
And you only accomplish things through antagonism.
Actually, there might be some truth to that. And with that bombshell, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We hope you guys are all doing well. Arif is back from the Combine, so we're going to be talking about Combine stuff, along with the rumors and innuendo regarding Kirk Cousins and Mike Florio going out on quite the whim, and a little bit about JJ and Danielle Hunter and all that. And we've got the mailbag as well. But before any of that, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the bonus episodes, or rather for a little less for the year subscription. You get access to the bonus episodes. You get access to one that I just put out about last week or so. And there'll be another one here in about a week as well. All sorts of bonus material available over at patreon.com/NorseCode, and the Discord is available to everyone who subscribes over there. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and pick out any number of fantastic merchandise options, including bumper stickers, including magnets, including a shower curtain, if the spirit moves you. Check it out over at norsecode.threadless.com.
If the spirit moves you to buy a shower curtain, I would highly suggest investing in an exorcism.
Look, the spirit might be wrong, but capitalism's capitalism. So if you're willing to give us a couple of bucks,
buy the shower curtain and then get the exorcist, I don't know if I love that either.
Have your priorities straightened out at norsecode.threadless.com. And with that, let's get into this episode of Norse Code. The first thing that should be brought up, I feel, before we even get to the Combine, is a report from Mike Florio that Kirk Cousins' feelings are hurt that the deal has not been done yet and was not done last year, and he is currently shopping around for homes in the greater Atlanta area. I feel like, is that a proper summation, or is that just more of an amalgamation of like different reports? The point is that apparently, according to some, Kirk Cousins is ready to move on to a fully guaranteed deal elsewhere.
Yeah, that is, I think, so that's multiple Mike Florio reports, but A, they're all from like the same conversation Florio had with Cousins. B, I think if you like summarize all of them, I think that's fine. That's a good summary. I would say that there's a pretty good chance that he's kind of doing due diligence by looking for homes in the Atlanta area. It should also be noted that his wife, Julie, is from the Atlanta area and her parents live there. And so, there's definitely like a reason to move to Atlanta, right? Because he highly values family. Plus, it would move him closer to Florida, where his father currently is. I know they're originally from Michigan, but that's something to keep in mind. But, I don't think that this is dispositive. It's not that he bought a house in Atlanta. It's that he's kind of exploring his options. And he's always been kind of a planner. And so this solidifies or gives us a little bit more compelling evidence that Atlanta is the likely destination if things don't work out with the Vikings. This does not demonstrate that this is the case or that a deal has been done or anything like that. I just think that Cousins is going to go into any negotiation or any deal or anything with some level of planning to essentially scout the area, right? So I think that that's what's happening more than anything else. I don't think that this demonstrates anything. Cousins having his feelings hurt always feels like very dismissive to say his feelings hurt. So I don't want to like keep it within that, but like, it's an accurate summary, right? That the Vikings didn't approach him with the contract terms that he felt were respectful of his time in Minnesota. I don't really have much to say on that. Maybe they were bad terms. If so, feeling disrespected would be appropriate, but I don't know what they are. My guess is that the Vikings want a 2-year deal where the second year is not necessarily fully guaranteed, but maybe it is. And that Cousins wants at least a 3-year deal. And I suspect that both of them have considered that kind of a line in the sand. And if that's the case, if that's the reason Cousins feels disrespected and it's not an issue of the total amount of money or the structure of the 2-year deal, it's just the fact that it's 2 years, then I would think that it's a bit unfair from him. But the thing that I expected to go into the combine is that Cousins' agent, Mike McCartney, would go around talking to all these teams, and he would find out that the market isn't there for him to get a fully guaranteed deal, and then he'd go back to the Vikings and they'd be able to work something out. That's not seemingly what happened. It seemed like Atlanta was willing to kind of push a lot of resources into this. And so that makes it pretty difficult for the Vikings to match. I did also hear, though, that one of the teams that was floated as a potential Cousins possibility before the combine, they're out. I heard the Steelers are just not going to do it. They are not interested. They were never interested. So that's interesting, at least, right? Like that's a piece of news. So there's fewer potential suitors. Obviously, he could go back to Washington, which would be very funny. He could go to Denver, which is like you're trading kind of one weirdo quarterback for another, but fine, whatever. And, some people kind of briefly mentioned Tennessee, but the leader in the clubhouse, so to speak, is Atlanta. And there's, rumors that Atlanta's just kind of willing to fork over whatever and not negotiate too hard. If that's the case, Cousins is probably going to pursue that, despite the fact that there's a lot of reasons to stay in Minnesota. First, it's a better environment, just in terms of winning. Atlanta's team is not that good. Like their defense was pretty good for a good chunk of last year, but ultimately it wasn't. Same with the Vikings, but for a longer period of time. But more importantly, even though Atlanta does have good skill position players, it's kind of hard to ignore that the Vikings have better skill position players, right? And the offensive line is better despite Atlanta's continuity there. So the situation is better in Minnesota, but also the kid just started school. He's got family in Minnesota. So I don't know. I entered the week thinking there was like a 70% chance or something the Vikings would re-sign him, and now it seems to be closer to 50. Kevin O'Connell on the Combine broadcast said that Cousins is quote unquote a process guy and that he would want to investigate the process of free agency. If Cousins hits free agency, it's going to be a lot more difficult for the Vikings to bring him back, not just because he gets to openly negotiate. Of course he does. That makes it difficult. But because now the Vikings don't get to alleviate the void year. As far as I understand the rules, I could be wrong about that. But my understanding is Cousins' void years accelerate and create dead cap money as soon as the beginning of the new league year starts and he's not signed. And if that's the case, then there's less of an incentive because now you're not wiping $10 million or whatever off the books. And his overall cap liability is going to be much larger than it would have been if you were to sign him before then. So a little bit of a game of chicken, I guess, with regards to this. But I guess we're kind of preparing for a Cousins-less future with the Vikings, which feels strange at this point, actually. It's been a while.
Well, it's been 8 years. And it's been, for the most part, 8 years of that injury, except for, that one. And say what you will about Cousins, there's been pretty consistent play. It's gotten better over the last couple of years, and it's unfortunate that things had to end the way they did last season. But, this is a lot of money, and he's getting older and coming off of an Achilles injury. And that's not something to just ignore. There are players who don't come back properly from an Achilles injury. It's important to note that, especially looking in the direction of whatever the hell's happening over in the Jets.
Yeah, right. I feel like we kind of washed this away, and it definitely has an impact. I mean, I saw someone post recently the history of running backs coming back from Achilles. Obviously, the positional demands are significantly different. I'm not going to ignore that, but bear with me. And only 2 of the 10 that this person highlighted actually came back to have productive seasons, right? Cam Akers is a good example of someone who did not. And one of the ones that succeeded was Donta Foreman, who's a committee back. It's not really a huge level of success. And though that is an exaggerated version of this, it is a reminder that it does actually matter that you're recovering from an injury, right? Cousins might be a pocket quarterback, but he does get hit a lot. A lot. And while I don't know that hits actually increase your likelihood of re-injury when it comes to Achilles, they certainly don't hurt in that regard in terms of limiting your exposure to liability. So, I think that we should be mindful of the fact that it could do a lot. If it robs you of your ability to plant on that foot as you throw, then you can't throw. You just can't. You can't be an NFL quarterback. So that's a possibility. It's not as big a risk as it is with running backs, but it's certainly a possibility. And that will control the conditions for his market. So I think the Vikings need to be cognizant of that. I think a lot of times when we go into these conversations, people are really concerned with fault, right? And like moral fault, right? Who deserves credit or blame. And it's not anyone's fault that he got injured. This isn't about what the Vikings might ethically owe to Kirk Cousins after his injury. This is about getting better as a team. And somebody with an Achilles injury, their fault or not, fairly or unfairly, represents a bigger injury risk than potentially a rookie. So, and he is rehabbing in the building. The Vikings do have O'Connell said, some of his rehab is done outside of the building. Some of it's done inside the building. That gives them enough access to his rehab process that they kind of have a good understanding of whether or not he's on schedule. And publicly, at least, they're saying that he's ahead of schedule. So that's something to keep in mind, too.
The idea that this is coming down to the Vikings or the Falcons is just, it's just funny to me. The idea that Cousins could potentially end up playing for Atlanta, which, as you mentioned, is not a better team at all. And most players at this time are either looking for money or looking for a ring. And I suppose if you're looking for money, you can find yourself in Atlanta, or do whatever it is that it takes to go back to the Washington Commanders, which I think is the funny option of the two.
That would rule so hard. Oh my God. Please do it, man. Do it.
That would be so funny to me. The idea of him coming back to a Dan Snyder-less organization.
Yeah, man. I mean, the problem's gone. It's gone. I am really curious if Washington fans would like accept him back. Like after Heineke and Howell and the marionette of Robert Griffin, and Dwayne Haskins rip. After all of that, like Cousins has to feel like, which I guess is the other side of it on Minnesota, but like Cousins has to feel like a breath of fresh air. Maybe they just want him back, right? Although, like again, like the other side of that is that Minnesota could have that run at quarterback without Cousins. Like that's what you have to prepare for.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the quarterbacks that are going to be available in the in free agency this year.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think that aside from Russ, which a lot of people have been talking about now.
Sorry, an actual shudder just went through me.
Aside from Russ, there's a lot of quarterbacks that are interesting. Like I don't like. Obviously, I don't mean like Ryan Tannehill, right? But I mean like Jacoby Brissett could be like an interesting bridge quarterback. Marcus Mariota potentially, Tyrod Taylor. Some people have been connecting the Vikings to Sam Darnold, which is interesting. I think that as a bridge quarterback, there's something not there, but like something that you can kind of hang your hat on, given how he finished in Carolina after Steve Wilkes took over, and then again in San Francisco in spot duty. Can we do
the Josh Dobbs thing and just not tell him the playbook?
Guys, that feels so right.
Like, just don't tell him the playbook at all, and force Kevin McConnell, who was robbed of the Coach of the Year award for that game, just force him to baby step explain. It the whole time.
That's got to be exhausting after after 3 games. It's got to be like, oh god, I got to explain this again. Yep. Christ,
Kevin O'Connell's just sitting, just like smoking cigarettes in the locker room, just like I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. He's looking like an Amazon employee around Christmas, just like twitching.
Yeah. I can't sit down. I can't go to the bathroom.
Nope.
I don't have time.
I don't have time. At every 40 seconds, life comes at you every 40 seconds. I'd like to see that. The Russ thing is can we just talk about how amazing of a situation that is? Just it's breaking the record on dead cap for 2 years. It breaks the record. It was Matt Ryan who had just signed a deal. Matt Ryan, was it 2022 or 2021? It was the Matt Ryan deal that was it. It's done. We're cutting him. He's out. And now it's Russell Wilson with one of the, we're not calling it the worst trade in NFL history because the Deshaun Watson thing is still there, and the Herschel Walker trade is still in play. But that's pretty like top 5-ish material.
Yeah. Someone, it was Greg Rosenthal, said that the Watson and Wilson trades are 2 of the worst trades in NFL history. And I was like, oh my God, they've knocked off the king. Skol Vikings.
If somehow we end up with Russ after it's decided this is the worst trade, like if somehow the Vikings benefit in some way, I'm leaving podcasting. I can't fight. I can't fight this a bit of irony. It's not how any of this works. So Kirk Cousins is brooding, according to some. According to others, he is house shopping and looking at his options as free agency quickly approaches. Other players that are potentially looking at deals, word around the campfire is that the Vikings are attempting to get a deal with Jefferson Dunn and Danielle Hunter as well, correct?
Yeah, and it sounds like the discussions with Justin Jefferson are quite close, from my understanding. The way that Kwesi talked about it at his podium session made it seem extremely close, and the way that we just kind of have an understanding of based off of conversations around the combine, it seems like it is pretty close. So I wouldn't be shocked to see a Jefferson deal announced right before training camp. They tend to, I mean, I guess the extension before training camp would have to come last year. I think this year they have to worry about the $19 million, but that's actually not an issue because part of the deal could convert the $19 million into signing bonus. It actually probably isn't a huge deal. But yeah, they could announce that right before training camp. If not, the next couple of days. But I don't think they have a real deadline in the way that people think they do. If I understand my cap methodology, which maybe I don't. But I think that they could if they convert the $19 million into signing, which is like not a problem. So with that in mind, we might have to wait in real life quite a while, but it may not actually be a significant issue. So I am somewhat comfortable that that's going to get done. Kwesi kept on saying stuff like, he's the best non-quarterback in football and we're going to compensate him as such. That's probably helps, soothe the ego. I know that there was that report, which now that I think about it, might have also been, no, it wasn't Florio. Was it Jeremy Fowler? I don't know. That report that the Vikings don't guarantee more than a year, and that bothers Jefferson. But mind you, in this context, it might be 2 years, right? Like this year's already guaranteed, so next year might be the guarantee year that's in that reference, and that's not too different even for high level players if it includes functional or rotating guarantees. So it sounds like that one's close. We're getting a lot more kind of signal on that one. As for the Danielle Hunter one, I don't think we've gotten very much signal at all. I very much would like them to re-sign him. Obviously, there's still a pretty good chance of that, but we just haven't heard anything. I think not hearing anything is a bad sign. I think that tells us that that Hunter might be out the door. In that case, the Vikings have virtually nobody on defense. Like, Harrison Phillips, great. Ivan Pace, who's essentially a sub-package linebacker at this point in his career. I wouldn't trust him to be like an every down linebacker. So, okay, you've got Harrison Phillips and Josh Metellus, which is Josh Metellus is good, but like that's the whole defense. It's congrats, good luck. Having Hunter, I think, would be enormous, and I'm kind of surprised that it's been this difficult. But he has had an issue with the Vikings front offices for a little bit now. He seems to like the coaching a lot, but the front offices seem to be an issue.
Be really curious if Danielle Hunter ends up just trying to move down to Dallas with Zimmer. There was a thought. I mean,
it's certainly a possibility.
There was a thought about Eric Kendricks apparently is being released by the Chargers, and I believe Eric Thompson had posited that that could be a potential.
You get the band back together.
Yeah, well,
I mean, Anthony Barr's available too. Hey, man,
he probably still has his Cowboys jersey.
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
I think the one thing though is that the Cowboys do have like a plethora of edge rushers, like enough that they're not even attempting to re-sign the guy that's going to hit free agency for them. So that's the one thing. But hey, if Zimmer wants him, he's going to get him, I think.
Yeah. Well, if anything, nobody's going to listen to Mike McCarthy on this. They're just going to listen to Zimmer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Dallas has a history of keeping a coach on for 1 year too long. I think we're looking at it, but we'll see. Well, let's go into combine stuff because it's actual football stuff and not speculation. But although that's kind of the point of combine stuff, I suppose. But Arif, you just spent a week in Indianapolis. How was the experience, and how did it compare to, say, last year's combine? Is it everything you wanted to be and more, or are you just writing clickbaity articles about how the combine is dying?
Okay, the thing that is like bothering me is that I feel like I'm becoming more of like a reporter now, and I don't like that. I don't like slowly developing sources and talking to people who can make decisions and evaluating the trustworthiness of the information I'm getting and running it through multiple people to verify it and being careful about, wording it so that I've got, exactly kind of what that source intended to come across. This sucks, man. I'm an opinions guy. I've got opinions. I have spreadsheets. I'll tell you about what's on the spreadsheets. I've got, here's some film. I'll, draw some stuff with a crayon on it. That's my jam, right? Like I love telling you that the running back didn't hit the B gap fast enough. I don't super love like being like, hey man, I talked to somebody who like consults with NFL teams and agents and is actually a big part of the draft process in a way that if I said more would reveal, who they are. And, this person thinks this, right? And I talked to someone in personnel and they think this, and it's like, oh God, that's weird. That's weird. That's not, I don't want to like launder like opinions through people who have a stake in them. Right. And so the combine dying thing is like, it's not really reporting so much as it is informed speculation as opposed to just speculation. But I talked to like a couple of people about like, hey man, no one's running these drills, right? No one's running these shuttles. That feels like a problem. And they're like, oh, but if only you knew. And I was like, wait, what? Is this a thing? Am I doing a thing right now? Should I record? Like, it was just like, okay. But yeah, the combine is at a bit of a crossroads because their decision to maximize the TV potential of the NFL combine, which is very silly, right? Like, it's just a silly thing, like abstractly, like already football is silly. The fact that we watch football is kind of defies logic, but fine, whatever. Now we're past that hurdle. Now we're watching an event that will give us maybe 10%, possibly 20%, but probably closer to 10% of the information we need to get us better informed about another event that tells us who the new players are on the team for the actual thing we want to watch, right? We're like, this is like 3 layers of abstraction at this point. And that's the thing that's being televised. So that's strange, right? But whatever, it works. People have, shelled out money for far stupider stuff, right? In fact, I think we're going to begin recording some stuff along those lines very soon for the April Fool's episode. Wait, no. Also, you all buy merch at ours. That's stupid that you buy our merch.
Arif, the opinions of Arif are not the opinions of North Code LLC.
What do you do? Stop that.
Nor are they the opinions of this show.
But yeah, so fine, whatever. We're televising the combine, but the decision to do that is paired with the decision to move it to prime time, because the only time people watch the NFL Network when it's not prime time is either like a football game and they no longer have Thursday Night Football, Amazon does, or when for some reason the gym puts that on instead of ESPN, right? Like that's what happens. And so the NFL Network wants people to pay for it, right? Because it's an additional channel. It's part of the sports package on like satellite feeds and stuff like that. I think I had to pay for the sports package for YouTube TV. I don't remember.
It is something that has to come in the sports package, yes.
Yeah, so it's a throw-in, right? And so you want to encourage people to buy it. And so for that, they're televising the combine at primetime. That means that they don't want the results spoiled, right? And so they can't have those workouts before then and then air them later, which they did, right? They aired them live, not a ton of people watched them, and then it was aired later when the results were already known. Like, oh, is Xavier Worthy going to really run a 4.21? Well, I'm interested in football, and so I got a notification on my phone because Google News knows I read football articles that said, hey, this guy just broke a record. So I am pretty confident about what I'm about to watch here, right? So they hold the event later. And primetime combine means that the fastest guys are running at like 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, their 40-yard dashes. And then after that, they'll do like the 3-cone and the short shuttle. But the problem is that we are now asking people who woke up at like 4:30 or 5 a.m., who have barely had anything to eat all day, who just went through like a grueling 5-hour medical experience at a hospital. Like, let me tell you, like, first of all, everybody already knows that going to the hospital sucks. Like, no one really looks forward to that. But this especially sucks, right? Because you go to the hospital, right? And then you have to wait in the waiting room, which everyone is familiar with. That sucks. You go in and then you have every test imaginable done to you. Like when you go to the doctor for a checkup, they might draw some blood, they'll weigh you, and they'll be like, hey, these are your cholesterol level, whatever, right? That is a fairly reasonably quick process. This is not a checkup, right? You have your entire medical history to go through, so you answer every medical history question again and again and again, and then you have all of the scans, right? If there's even remotely a chance that you may have damaged your foot 3 years ago, they'll put an X-ray of your foot, right? They'll put you through I think it's a heart health machine or a cardio machine. Anyway, you have to exercise while you're doing it. It sucks. You do all of that. It's a bunch of tests that you normally wouldn't do in a regular physical. And then a bunch of team doctors ask you questions. And because they don't want all 32 team doctors in the room at the same time, it's rounds of doctors. And my understanding, when it was last explained to me, is that there's 8 rounds of doctors. And so you're answering the same question about the same injury you had 3 years ago to 8 rounds of doctors. And it just sucks. It just sucks. So there's that, and it drains all your energy. Then you do a bunch of team meetings that are probably kind of high stress. And you barely get to eat. And then you run your 40-yard dash. And that probably is it for your workout adrenaline, that 40-yard dash. And now you're telling me on kind of a wet field-ish, it is indoors, but there were some traction issues on the field this year. Which actually makes it even more amazing that Xavier Worthy broke the record, because I saw a lot of slipping. But like now they have to do the short shuttle and the 3-cone at 8 p.m. F that. And so we had a bunch of people opt out. So I include all of that I just said in my story over at Wide Left about whether or not the combine is dying, plus a lot more things to consider. Like I talked to a couple of people that suggested that the combine might actually be on the way out, not just as a product of that change, but because of a product of a number of concurrent, coincidental structural changes in the draft process and the college process that make it a little bit more difficult. So check that out. But I do think that unless the NFL increases player buy-in, that the combine could diminish in importance just as the NFL was attempting to ramp up its importance. So that's something that I learned that. I went to Indianapolis not knowing what story I was going to write. I did get a lot more information for a story I've been working on since December. So pay attention to that for that. So that helps, but I did that. And then I did a piece about like, hey, some of these players are kind of fun, so I'm going to put together an all-fun team for the combine. And that was kind of a last-minute, hey, that's kind of a fun idea. So those are the 2 pieces I left about the combine. But that's like, I'm kind of getting that sense. And fewer teams are showing up, which I didn't even include that bit in the piece. And it feels like, even though like there were more leaks at this year's combine than I feel like I've ever seen. That seems kind of crazy to me, that there was just a ton of news coming out of the combine. I mean, there's always news coming out of the combine, but this felt like more than usual. And it feels like the event is really just for that more than it is anything else. And the NFL doesn't need that, right? Like I need it for my job, but the NFL doesn't need that. That's not an important part of their calendar. They don't think, hey, we got to have an event where we leak a bunch of stuff to reporters. Like that's not that. Plus there's the owners meeting anyway, which is in a couple of weeks. They'll do that there anyway. So I don't know. The combine is weird and different. And also I stayed in an Airbnb, which is a 20-minute walk away from the convention center, which I don't recommend. I don't like Ubering every day, and I didn't, and I walked a lot. And I'm not as fit as the guys at the combine. I'm just going to say that.
That's the other thing you discovered this last week?
Yeah, it's takeaway 1, the power of enemies.
Yes.
Takeaway 2, I'm not as fit as professional athletes. Although, in fairness to me, let me put this out there. They only had to run 40 yards. I had to walk like a mile. Also with the backpack, a very heavy backpack.
With the backpack.
Heavy, let me be clear, heavy backpack.
Well,
the backpack has my way too heavy laptop, which you're familiar with.
Yeah.
A second screen, a keyboard, because my laptop's keyboard doesn't work. An additional mouse, because there's no way I'm using a trackpad. A microphone, this microphone, right? A webcam, a book, Matthew Coller's book, the PFF book. Check it out. An extension cord, chargers for both my phone and my... This thing's heavy, man. It's not great. I'm a hero.
Wow. I almost don't know what to say to something of that. Wow. All right. So, Arif Hero Hassan, if that's where we're going now. The Vikings had their eyes on a number of different prospects, including potential quarterbacks. What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, specifically at the quarterback position, the things I heard are, and I caveated this out a ton on Football Party, and I'll caveat it out here too. The things I heard were not from anybody involved directly with the Vikings organization. So let me make that clear. No one in a decision-making capacity for the Vikings told me these things. No one connected in the Vikings organization to the decision-makers told me these things. So this is third-hand information. When you see a report from like Diana Rossini, who's like, hey, someone's going to trade up to 4, she has talked to a decision-maker, right? So that's the difference here. She's not hearing it from a friend of a friend and then deciding to report it. So what I heard is the Vikings really like J.J. McCarthy. I don't know to what extent that suggests that they would be willing to take him at 11 or trade up for him all the way up to 4, as Rossini perhaps suggested when she said quarterbacks could go 1, 2, 3, 4. So I don't know what like him a lot means, but it sounds like he's definitely on their board, right? So that's something to keep in mind. I don't love J.J. McCarthy. I just have issues with the velocity on outside passes, especially outside intermediate. He has an issue throwing left, which seems the bits won't stop, I guess.
No, they really won't.
They just can't. They have. We were just talking about this on Twitter, where someone was like, "Arif, you didn't even mention the kickers," and I was like, "Oh my god, what?" And then they tagged you, and they're like, "Can you believe you didn't mention the kickers?" And I was like, "Is this a bit? Do we have a kicker bit?" And of course we do. We have a whole league dedicated to kickers, and I just forgot. We have so many bits. We have reached bitical mass. There's so many bits, and they're so powerful.
10.5 years, and we're at bitical mass now.
Yeah, it's bad. We need to figure out what the half-life of these bits are, because it seems like it's pretty long. The McCarthy not throwing left thing is extremely amusing, something to keep in mind. I don't think he's as accurate as his strength profile suggests that he is. And obviously deep, he has some issues. Luke wrote about that over at Wide Left. But I don't like where the ball location is on a lot of these passes in ways that I think will materialize in the NFL, like throws to the wrong shoulder, for example, or kind of misidentifying a seam throw as a go ball or something like that. It's not great. In tight windows, it's all right. So maybe it's just he doesn't know where he should be throwing it. Once he does, he can adjust. But yeah, he's also the youngest quarterback out of all of these guys. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, the Vikings seem to like him a lot. And he can operate an offense on time within structure. From my understanding, super smart. Great. The Vikings have done a ton of homework on Jayden Daniels. Alec Lewis at The Athletic wrote a piece about how much homework they've done on Jayden Daniels. They've been the scouts have been writing reports on him since before Kwesi even got here into the Spielman era. So they've got a pretty big file on him. So whatever decision they make on him will be extremely informed. My understanding is that they don't like him. So I don't know what to do with that. But again, no decision maker told me this. That's just what I gathered amongst the people there. It also seems like they really like Drake May a lot. Now, a few people emphasize this to me, more than one person. A few people emphasize this a lot. And I was always like, well, yeah, he's the second best, or according to some, the best quarterback in this draft. Everybody likes him. That's not news, right? Like, I bet the Ravens like him. They're not going to do anything with that, right? Like, yeah, sure. I'm sure if the Ravens scouting department's like, hey, this is a guy anyway, right? Like I don't know what to do with that. But, the Vikings they do have a shot. And I just wrote up a mock draft where they trade up to grab either May or Daniels. I'll let you decide, or not decide. I'll let you find out when it gets published. You can't decide. Sorry, my piece, not yours.
If you want to decide, I suppose you have to do your own mock.
Yeah, which is so hard these days. But yeah, so it is possible for them to trade up into the top 5 to grab a quarterback and still have like a complete draft. Like, I think people have this understanding that if you trade up from the middle of the draft to the top of the draft, you just don't have you have like 2 more picks for the rest of the draft. And like, yeah, initially, and then you can work around that. Like you can get more picks. I promise you. I pick a bunch of players in this draft, even though I trade up to. In fact, I intentionally overpay using my mock draft simulator. I intentionally overpay to simulate the quarterback tax that occurs with trade ups. So you can, in fact, get more picks. So that's something to kind of understand, is that you can still get a reasonable sized draft class with all of that in mind. So that emphasis that people were giving me, man, they really like Drake May, would suggest to me that they're willing to make a move to kind of make good on that, I guess. So there's that. So that's my understanding. There was not a ton of talk about other players there that the Vikings might or might not like. And I think that's just because those are the questions being asked, and not that the Vikings were, in fact, laser focused on quarterback. In fact, again, Alex Peace at The Athletic said that they were doing a ton of homework on defensive guys, and that the draft will be extremely defense heavy if they can help it, right? Like, obviously, if all these defenders go and all these really good offensive players fall, the Vikings are probably not going to reach across round values just to make sure they have a cornerback. If like Marvin Harrison drops to 11, right, they're probably just taking him, right? Like, oh no, we've got 3 insanely good receivers. Crap, right? Like, I think they'll figure it out, right? So, I don't think that they're going to like shoot themselves in the foot, but it sounds like they really like a couple of defensive players in the draft. I don't know who those defensive players are. Were I to guess, I would say Chop Robinson's on that list. The way that they have talked about their analytical process tells me they don't use the same models that we on the outside of NFL teams tend to use. And so, for example, Terrion Arnold's 40 time, which is like a 4 or 5, 6 or something along those lines, it wasn't as impressive as some of these other 40s. Isn't as big of an issue for them as some of the other analytical data that they might have. I'm not saying I know that they like Terrion Arnold. I'm saying that I wouldn't knock him out. And personally, I like him a lot. And so it would be cool if he was a Viking. And so I think that there are probably a couple of people that they're interested in. I think that Chop Robinson has an extremely, extremely strong analytical profile. So personally, that's somebody that I would watch. But again, I didn't hear stuff about other players besides quarterbacks. Alec heard something about them focusing on defenders. My understanding is that some of the receivers at the Senior Bowl did receive a little bit of extra love from the Vikings. I don't think that means Roman Wilson, and it probably means Ladd McConkey, but they're probably not going to get him because he's probably a second-round player. But it could mean, somebody like a Xavier Legette, who I didn't think had a great Senior Bowl, but I'm kind of coming around on him as a prospect. I don't know. So it could be like Xavier Legette. It could be Jamari Thrash. It could be, Corley, who didn't actually run at the combine. It could be those guys. But it sounds like the receivers at the Senior Bowl got a fair amount of love. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, I don't know if I have a ton of other kind of reporting grift, reporting detritus to get from the combine with regards to what the Vikings will do. Oh, I already mentioned this. Sorry, I was going to say, I also learned the Steelers are not going to sign Kirk Cousins, but I already said that.
Yeah, it turns out. Well, before we go to the mailbag, there is a bit of Vikings news that we can talk about in that the Vikings have released Alexander Mattison. This was not entirely unexpected, but Mattison will not be a member of the Vikings moving forward.
Yeah. Like you said, not entirely unexpected. He wasn't given, I think, was he a 3.6 million dead cap guy? Which, that's not great. But he didn't perform really well. He was given a ton of opportunity. He was basically the starter for the first half of the year, right? So great. But he didn't. It was 1.25 million on of dead money. That's not too bad at all. But yeah, not a high upside guy, and he wasn't consistent enough to give us more than high upside. When I looked at free agency running backs, my understanding is Josh Jacobs is completely off the market. Not because the Vikings like or don't like him, but because he's essentially, it's already locked in kind of what team he's going to go to, and it's not Minnesota. So I'll say that. I like him. So, he's like the youngest second contract free agent guy that's like good, right? Because Clyde Edwards-Helaire is younger, but he's not like good. But yeah, this is a pretty rich free agency class for running backs. So at the top, obviously, you've got Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley. I guess Derrick Henry, he's like 30 though. So there's that. Austin Eckler, I think is already in the same way that Josh Jacobs is. It's already spoken for is maybe the best way to put it. So he's probably off the market. And then after that, Gus Edwards wouldn't be too bad. Devin Singletary, I like a lot as a potential signing. DeAndre Swift wouldn't be too bad. I mentioned Dante Foreman. I don't think he'd be too bad. Damian Harris I've always kind of liked. I liked him since he was like a sophomore at Alabama, which is like unusual for me because I don't really pay attention to college guys, but I saw him run when I was watching. Was it Josh Jacobs? Might have been, but I was watching some other Bama backs and I was like, this Damian Harris guy is like really good. And so I've just kind of liked him a lot forever and it'd be kind of fun. And I also mentioned Salvon Ahmed from the Dolphins, who is obviously very fast and he wouldn't be a primary back or anything, but would serve a role in the offense. But I also think that there's a possibility that like in the fourth round, they could draft a guy, whether that's Braylon Allen from Wisconsin, who I kind of like, Marshawn Lloyd from USC, who I actually like kind of a lot, not like an enormous amount, but I do like him like a fair amount. Or any of these other backs, Kamani Vidal from Troy. I don't know. But it's a fairly decent mid-round running back group too. So a good time to have made that mistake, I suppose, for the Vikings.
Do you think there's any chance that the Vikings end up going free agent for running back?
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. I think that if you're a team that's going to spend like, what is it, $13 million on Josh Oliver? I don't even remember anymore. If you're going to spend that kind of money on a tight end, because he blocks well in the running game, it's not entirely weird that you're going to spend money on the actual running backs. Now, obviously, the whole thing about analytics is that is that the running back is not in control of their production as much as the blockers are, right? So an individual guard contributes more to the running game than the running back, right? And obviously, a blocking tight end would do that as well. So with that in mind, right? Okay, I just looked it up. The Josh Oliver was $21 million over 3 years, not 13.5. With that in mind, it's not necessarily that they would spend big at running back, but I don't think I would rule out mid-market running back. I don't think that they think that there's no difference among running backs. I think that if they want to invest in a run game, they know at some point they're going to have a quality running back to do that. And though they might want that to cost less than like a tight end who blocks for him, they still want to make sure that guy can take advantage of the blocking. And the Vikings actually had fairly decent run blocking for most of the year, and they didn't produce off of it. And so there's like a minimum threshold of talent that you need. And I think making sure that you grab one in free agency would allow you to kind of meet that. Because we saw what D'Onta Foreman did when there was blocking ahead of him. He did pretty decently at Carolina. He did all right in Chicago. Not like David Montgomery did in Chicago. What a mistake letting him go. But, all right. Also, speaking of in-division running backs, I suppose A.J. Dillon's available, I think. I'd stay away from him, but that's, hey, that's a guy.
It's a guy. Well, let's go to the mailbag. We've got plenty of stuff in here. Beginning is definitely more football oriented. And then because it is our show and it is the off season, it goes off the rails about halfway through. So Zach Dixon asks an interesting question. He goes, in regards to scouting college players, what common quarterback flaws have we seen that have been fixable in the NFL? And what are some flaws that seem nearly impossible to overcome?
One thing that kind of bothers me, I like this question a lot. One thing that kind of bothers me is when, especially coaches, former coaches, but when analysts go on air and they talk about this very question, they say the word accuracy. They say accuracy is difficult to fix in the NFL. And that doesn't make sense to me because there are multiple reasons a quarterback may be inaccurate, right? It may be that no matter how much you work on this quarterback, whether it's getting his eyes right, whether it's making sure that his release is good, making sure that his grip on the ball enhances his accuracy, that his follow through is complete, that he's throwing with his core instead of with his arm, that his footwork is sound, right? There are people, I bet I'm one of them, where if all of that was perfect, they would not be accurate. In fact, I would say most people in the world would not be NFL accurate, even if they had perfect NFL everything, right? Mechanics, eyes, follow through, whatever, right? So it could be. So there could be some quarterbacks where that's the case. But I just listed off a ton of things that improve your accuracy when they're fixed. I don't always want to go to Josh Allen when we talk about these things, but he is a good example of that, where a change in his throwing motion substantially improved his accuracy. And that was mostly an upper half fix. Some of the things that I described are easy to fix relative to other problems in the NFL. Some of the things I described are not. In fact, I use the word footwork, and that is a broad category of thing, right? There's dropping back from center. That is a type of footwork. There's dropping back from shotgun. That is a type of footwork. And those kinds of footwork are kind of relatively easy to fix. And it would be something that you would need to fix with, say, Jaden Daniels, right? It throws off his timing. Other types of footwork can be difficult to fix. What you do with your lead foot when you throw is so tremendously important. Drake May, for example, throws with a narrow base. Part of it is that his lead foot doesn't go out far enough. And then also when it does go out, it's not necessarily pointed in the right direction. I don't think that was what Braun talked. No, he talked about Jaden Daniels' footwork, and then he also talked about J.J. McCarthy's footwork, I want to say, in the two pieces that he did for Wide Left on the subject. But that is an issue with Drake May, right? So that's a bit of a harder fix, right? What you do with your back foot, that's definitely a harder fix, right? If you're throwing with your arm, if you're all arm and you're not throwing with the rest of your body, your core and your feet, that's probably either you're an extremely young quarterback or that's probably not going to get fixed. That's kind of an issue with Michael Penix, right? So people say accuracy is hard to fix in the NFL, and that is sometimes true depending on the reason the quarterback is inaccurate. And so if a quarterback isn't opening their hips enough, that might even be like a physical problem, right? Like it might just be that they don't have hip mobility, right? It might be that the stabilizer muscles in their hips don't allow them to open up. It might be that they've just have been born with a limited range of motion in their hips, right? It might be any number of things, right? that could be difficult to fix, right? So, or it could just be that their release isn't as tight as it needs to be. Bridgewater, who's already known as an accurate quarterback coming out of college, changed his release in the NFL because Norv Turner didn't like his release. And honestly, I didn't love it at the time. But at the end of 2015, we saw what it did. The second half of 2015 for Teddy was really good, and he had a much tighter, quicker release that improved his accuracy. Again, he was already accurate, but it improved his accuracy. It's possible, right? So I want to say that that is something to kind of keep in mind, is that there are some things that are easy to fix, some things are harder to fix, but sometimes when we talk about them in two broad strokes. It's sometimes these things can be fixed and can be not. Arm velocity, for example, historically does not improve substantially, but it can improve. And there's a lot of reasons, again, that arm velocity can change, right? I've talked about it before on this podcast about how Drew Brees improved his arm strength by working out a ton. He loves working out. He's maniacal about it, right? And sometimes that means working out your arm, but a lot of times it means leg day, because that's where a lot of your arm strength comes from, especially if you're a weaker armed quarterback, you're throwing with your whole body. So your arm strength could be a product of just not having strong enough legs, which can or cannot be fixed. That depends on the player, and everybody's a little bit different. If you've been trying to add muscle mass to your legs for 3 years and you're maxed out, that's it. You're maxed out. Nothing I can do about that. But some players haven't been trying and so need to try, and once they try, will improve that, right? Great. That improves your arm strength, as does mechanical consistency, as getting better at the mechanics I just described. Those increase your accuracy. They also improve your arm velocity. So arm strength generally doesn't get fixed, but if there's a reason that you can identify that you don't have arm strength that has nothing to do with the physical limitations of your arm or your legs or your core, which you can improve your arm strength by working at your core, then it can be improved. You're probably not going to go from, Teddy Bridgewater to Josh Allen in terms of arm strength ever, but that's something to kind of keep in mind. So, that's something that's difficult. I think overall, obviously, athleticism is somewhat baked into the cake because you're not going to focus on that. So you're going to get what you get from a quarterback in terms of their athletic capability. But I'd say Jared Goff has demonstrated a little bit more athleticism in the NFL than he did at UCLA, right? That's something to kind of keep in mind, it's not static. Kirk Cousins, it feels like, remember, he's just using it more, but it does feel like, hey, until the Achilles thing, which I guess that's the risk. But yeah, so there's a lot of things, but it's tough because in order to give you an accurate answer, I would have to break it down in more detail rather than just say, well, arm strength and accuracy can't be fixed, but vision and full field reading can be fixed. And it's like, well, maybe all of that's kind of true. Maybe all of that's kind of false. So that's what the value of like a lot of these position coaches provide. If you'll remember, Blair Walsh was not super accurate in college, and although he did not turn out to be accurate in the NFL at the end, one of the stories about him was that the kicking coach for the Vikings, or I guess special teams coordinator, Mike Prefer, saw that he was planting incorrectly on his kicks and saw what incredible strength that he had, and he thought he could improve his accuracy by changing how he planted. And for that first year, that was correct. So like a lot of these position coaches might have a good understanding of like what is not fixable from a trait. So that's all. That was a very long answer, but I think that gives us a better understanding of like why some of the ways that people talk about quarterbacks or any position really can sometimes be way too broad.
Yeah. Corey Rug asks, if the Vikings get J.J. McCarthy in the draft, when in the season will the inevitable Paul Allen call, "They are J.J." get old?
Probably week 8. Ideally like week 5, because that means it's been happening a lot.
Yeah.
But, probably week 8. I guess it depends on how quickly J.J. McCarthy starts, but this is me assuming it's week 1. Yeah. So, yeah.
Professor Poop asks, which is poopier/funnier? Falcons quarterback Kirk Cousins beating the Vikings on Monday Night Football to knock us out of the playoffs, but then losing to the number 1 round himself, or Viking quarterback Russell Wilson leading the Vikings to 12-5, but playing terrible in the NFC Championship to lose to Atlanta Kirk.
The second one is poopier, but the first one I think is funnier, right? That Kirk eliminating the Vikings for the playoffs and then immediately losing in the playoffs, that's hilarious. I can't change that. That's funny. But I think it feels, the NFC Championship one, especially against the Falcons, that one feels way worse. That one's way poopier.
Yeah, that's not great. Charles Wrights asks, I'm pretty certain the Vikings should be moving on from Greg Joseph this offseason. Are we better off looking to free agency or the draft for his replacement? And who would be your preferred targets from each?
Kaimi Fairbairn, for obvious reasons.
I had to go that one. Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, quote unquote, to the draft, but don't draft a guy. Grab a couple of undrafted free agents. The rate at which undrafted free agents succeed versus the rate at which drafted kickers succeed is not meaningfully different. There's some data out there to suggest that undrafted free agent kickers are better than drafted kickers. When you account for the fact that we don't actually do a very good job of accounting for how many undrafted free agent kickers show up to camp and then lose competitions. I don't think that that's actually the case. Like, I don't think undrafted kickers are better, but the most successful kickers in the NFL primarily are undrafted. The hit rate of drafted kickers is very, 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 very low. And so I would get a couple of undrafted free agent kickers, waste a couple of roster spots, right? Like, I don't do a Chicago and get like 11 or whatever they did. But like, instead of just having 2, get 4, all undrafted kickers, maybe a free agent, maybe Kaimi Fairbairn, right? But like, Joey Sly is out there. He's kind of youngish for a kicker. Chase McLaughlin, former Viking, grab him, right? Like, sure, sign one of these guys and you'll have a baseline of performance to work off of, but get a couple of UDFA kickers. I don't know if this is a strong kicker class. I certainly haven't heard a kicker's name the way I heard like Zane Gonzalez's name, right? Was he a 4th round pick? Or Roberto Aguayo's name or his brother's name, right? I haven't heard a kicker, in the same sense, but this is probably a class with kickers in it. You never know. So get a couple of undrafted free agents, because I think your hit rate with 3 undrafted free agents plus a veteran is going to be higher than your hit rate with a draft pick.
Well, let's go to Kenneth Allen, who asks, imagine the Vikings have to trade up for the opportunity to grab the 4th quarterback. How often does the 4th quarterback become a legitimate starter? Let's say receives a second contract for simplicity. Given the likelihood of that level of play, how much would you be willing to give up to trade that up?
Kenneth, I really like that you gave me a parameter for this question that would make my research very easy. I am sorry to inform you I did not do that research. But that's good question construction, so I'm just going to give you that one. I remember a number of years ago when the Vikings were in a position to draft the 4th quarterback in a draft. I believe it was the Teddy Bridgewater draft, 2014. There's a lot of quarterbacks in the draft. Blake Bortles, Johnny Manziel, some other guy, Derek Carr, Teddy Bridgewater. Who was the other guy? I don't remember. I think Jimmy was in that draft too, right?
Garoppolo?
Was he? I don't know. Was that 2018? I don't know. It doesn't matter. A lot of quarterbacks in the draft. So people wrote pieces on the 4th quarterback, right? And we've now recently had a number of drafts where we've had 4 quarterbacks of note. So like the 2018 draft, like Josh Allen and them, the 2017 draft, like Patrick Mahomes and them. Like there's a lot of quarterbacks, right? Before that, the data on the 4th quarterback was not super useful. And I saw a piece in a local newspaper that was like, hey, these 4th quarterbacks, they're not very good. And I looked over their data and they were going over the 4th quarterback of like every draft, right? Which meant sometimes a 6th round pick, sometimes a 3rd round pick. And they were comparing it to the Vikings' opportunity to select a quarterback in the 1st round. And I was like, what? Like, this is not comparable. Obviously, if you include guys from the 5th round or whatever, that's not a good quarterback. Like, that guy is not going to be comparable to the 4th quarterback who happens to be the first one in a draft, right? Like, the 1983 draft's fourth quarterback is going to be better than the 2013 draft's fourth quarterback, who I think was like Ryan Nassib, if I remember correctly. That's not a reasonable foundation for comparison. So I don't like that. And that's not a criticism of the question, because I'm sure you would have expected me to account for that. Again, I didn't actually do it, so maybe I'll turn it into a piece, but probably not.
By the way, 2014 quarterbacks for the NFL draft. The first one selected was number 3 for Blake Bortles.
Yeah.
And then the second one was Johnny Manziel, pick 22.
Johnny.
Boy, he's making an interesting round right now on the talk shows. Bridgewater, pick 32, was the third quarterback.
Oh, and then Derek Carr was the fourth one. Okay.
Yep, Derek Carr was the fourth, and then another quarterback was not picked up for a while. But that one was Jimmy Garoppolo, pick 62.
All right. That's technically the second round.
Yeah, yes, the very end of it, but yes, 2 more picks and it's the end.
Yeah. Wow. I usually don't trust my memory, so I feel good now.
Next one was Logan Thomas,
who's a tight end.
There's Logan Thomas, Tom Savage,
Aaron
Murray, AJ McCarron. Yeah. So.
Oh wow, not a great draft for SEC quarterbacks.
Zach Mettenberger was the one after that, so keeping in the SEC.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to talk to the S2 guys in person at the Combine, and they wouldn't tell me any player score, which sucked. I was like, hey man, just give me something. And they're like, no, not after what happened to CJ Stroud. No. And I was like, I get it, but I prefer that you give me something. But I was like, look, Zach Mettenberger had to be the slowest processor I've ever seen. And you started with LSU. Do you have his S2 score? And they were like, kind of not really. And if we did, we wouldn't tell you. And I was like, okay, but now I'm curious about kind of not really. Did he like leave in the middle of it? Like it's like a 30-minute test. Like if he's that impatient, it'll be the first time he actually did something early. And they're like, well, it was just a completely different version of the test because we were still figuring out what the test would be and how it works, right? Because if you read a bunch of stuff from last year from the S2, they'll be like, hey, this thing has been processed for 7 years. That would include 2014 at LSU, or 2013, I guess. And they didn't tell me if they were impressed or unimpressed. They were just like, the test just was immature at the time. But that's how long they've been doing the test, first of all. But second, man, what I'd give to get Zach's S2. What a bad quarterback he was. Oh, my gosh.
I remember there was a time that I was going to make you and Dusty do the Wonderlic back when that was a thing. And we were going to do the Wonderlic on the show. And I think while you guys were filling it out, I was going to tell some awful story about my life. And then afterwards, we were going to grade your Wonderlic scores and officially rule Dusty not capable for NFL play. That seemed like a good idea at the time, but also from Kenneth Allen, when will analytics teams copy the B'nai Gesserit? Apologies. And Gesserit and manipulate athletes' bloodlines to create the Lyson Al quarterback, the Signacaller from the outer world. This is awful.
Not a Dune reader.
No, Dune and I don't get along for a number of reasons that I won't go into here.
A number?
Yeah.
It feels like something you need to get into.
It's not something I need to get into. It sounds like a
classic James story.
I have seen it. It's not. I've seen Dune on in the background more times than I can count. I'm good. I'm not interested. But whose quarterback talents will help him lead his team on the golden path to the greatest dynasty the NFL has ever seen. The spice must flow. There. That's as enthusiastic as I can get for Dune. I'm sorry. It's just not happening. Let's go to QAM or Cam X-Storm, who asks, in this scenario, the quarterback situation has gone horribly wrong. Nick Mullins is our starting quarterback. What play style would lead to better outcomes? A, embrace the bozo and let him go nuts, or B, try and rein him in and play more conservative?
My off the cuff reaction is embrace the bozo and let him go nuts, right? Hey, if he's going to go wild, go wild. Just be as high variance as possible. Let the picks come, but they're going to be further down the field. Great. Those picks don't matter. Get touchdowns. Go. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, well, if you encourage him to be conservative, he will probably still make wacko plays. And encouraging him to be conservative probably gets you closer to the ideal middle ground for what you want from him. And he did do that in San Francisco, and it did work out pretty well, relatively speaking. So I did want to say A, but because he's always going to go nuts, I would say B, knowing that he will never play conservative. So you just try to play him conservatively, and you'll get a lot of conservative play in there. And then you'll go sicko mode sometimes, and you'll get a 50-yard touchdown in either direction. Who's to say? Let the dice roll. The fates may decide.
We're not going more Dune, are we? That's okay. I just wanted to make sure.
I feel like that's more of a Game of Thrones type phrasing that I just used there.
Sammy asks an important question. Does the CBA allow us to have two players named Byron Murphy on the roster, or is there a one Byron Murphy limit?
I looked through the CBA, and it does not have that specific set of name restrictions. And I believe, was it the Jets had two Michael Carters very recently from the same draft class? There's a Michael Carter, the running back, and then Michael Carter 2, the cornerback. And he was not named 2 because there was already a Michael Carter on the Jets. He was named Michael Carter 2 well before we were aware of the existence of the running back. His father was named Michael Carter. This is important. But his father is not the running back. I think we're all on the clear. Okay, so this would be the same thing. A Byron Murphy Jr. and a Byron Murphy 2. So I guess not the exact same thing, but the same thing. We've got a 2 and a not 2. And it's just going to have to be what it is on the jersey. And I think when you're tweeting about it, so luckily for the Jets beat room, they were never on the field at the same time, right? Because they played on, cornerback and running back. They played on different teams. Here, that would be a problem. They would be on the field at the same time a lot. So I would probably just say CB Murphy and DT Murphy a lot. But I think that this does not run afoul of what the NFLPA would want, especially because it would force Byron Murphy to be drafted later, which it feels like it's anti-player. The NFLPA wouldn't want that. No. So yeah, the CBA currently allows at least 2. 3, I can't make any promises.
3 is right out. Eldon Mosshart asks, for whomever signs Kirk Cousins, how well do you imagine he would perform if his contract had performance incentives paid and backstage passes to Creed?
Okay, that does violate the CBA. Let me be clear. Non-monetary compensation is not allowed. It doesn't seem to be super well enforced. Tom Brady did get to have his company inside the building, and then the company could charge the Patriots for its services. And then when Tom Brady was cut, my understanding is that the company left the premises. So, take from that what you will. But you can make a promise to convert salary into something and then provide that something, right? Russell Okung, quote unquote, had his salary paid in Bitcoin, but he didn't. He got his salary paid in salary, but it was just converted to Bitcoin. You could do the same thing here, where you could get backstage passes to Creed, get a third party to value them at some number, and then deduct that from his salary and give that to him. Maybe whatever incentives he has in his contract. The thing is, it's important to understand, Cousins is not an incentives in his contract guy. We did have a very long discussion about just that. He just wants the money he signed for. He, in fact, has, since 2016, received every dollar he has signed for, which is impressive. Even I haven't done that. That's really cool. But that also means that he's not an incentives guy. So, keep that in mind too. That said, if he was an incentives guy, the Vikings would have a ring by now, obviously, because of Creed.
They would be able to be taken higher, yeah. Francis Ford Copium asks, what team has the need for a quarterback and has the best slogan Russell Wilson could mediocrely cut a promo for?
Oh, the first one I came up with, we can't put in the podcast, but
it is unfortunate. It's just staring at us like a bad something on the plate. You would come up with Steelers country. Let's gird for girders.
Yeah.
The Panthers is good for Panthers country. Let's pound.
I really like this next one, Bucks country. Bucks country. Let's plund.
I think you only like it because Google Docs refused to let me plund on here. It kept auto-correcting me to something else.
To pound. So we had 2 let's pound on the... But no, Buccaneers plunder. They want to plund. They yearn to plund.
They yearn for plunding. Maybe. Patriots country, we had a couple of these. Let's colonize. Yeah. Let's manifest, and it's tea time.
Patriots country, it's tea time. Russell Wilson saying Patriots country, it's tea time would rule.
That would rule
so much.
Best case scenario. Best case scenario is that it's Patriots on that. And Bears country, let's gentrify, which I suppose means the whole, well, Chicago having the problem that it is, but like the movement of the stadium and everything. Right. Let's beef, and let's put too much on a goddamn hot dog. I
feel like I could envision Russell Wilson saying that.
I just want to hear him drop a GD. That's all I want. Chris asks, is Russell Wilson the closest we can come to a modern cattle rustler?
What does that even mean? Did like cattle rustlers like leave dead cat behind when they stole cattle? Is that
famously? That's actually how we got to modern cattle. That's how cattle rustling became a thing. Is everyone was just aware of dead cap rules and void years due to the Old West. Russell Wilson is just the latest person carving up the memory. Yeah. Maximilius, who I forgot to mention as our newest Patreon subscriber, asks, is it foreseeable...
Sign up. Thank you.
Yes. In the near term, is it possible that in the near term, the Combine will fade away in importance, eclipsed by individual schools' pro days in a sort of E3 style scenario?
So I did talk about this a little bit, and it does seem to be kind of heading in that direction, but it's not like inevitable or anything. Kind of weird what happened to E3, but it became insanely expensive for companies to do what they did there, so fair enough. I don't know about individual school pro days. One thing that happened recently is that the Big 12 announced that they would do a Big 12 pro day, so an all-conference pro day, and we could see some of that. Of course, now that the Big 10 is enormous, I don't even know how many schools there are. 20? Let's say 20. It's huge, right? That seems like it just wouldn't work, but they could also ironically do it in Indianapolis, right? Because like the Big Ten championships also often happen in Indianapolis, if not always happen in Indianapolis. I don't remember, but they very clearly happen a lot there. So you could just do the Combine again for the Big Ten and you'd have the facilities and stuff like that. But that's a lot of players. So they might split it in two. I could totally see the SEC doing that. That would be super fun. I would love that. That would rule. But I don't think it'll be individual schools, which kind of sucks for a lot of these smaller school players because they go to their local FBS schools pro day. They don't like, unless the small school has like a ton of players like NDSU, right? They tend to just go to like the Bemidji State guy goes to the University of Minnesota's pro day, right? Like that's usually what, or sometimes NDSU's, but that's usually what happens. And I doubt the Big 12, maybe, but I doubt the Big 12 will like have like Kennesaw State or whatever. Plus it's being held in like Frisco and Texas, right? So, Dubuque's pro day doesn't exist. So they probably go to like, it wouldn't go to Frisco, probably go to Iowa's, but if they have a Big Ten pro day, that's going to make it really difficult for that small school to do it, right? Like if you're at a school in like Vermillion, South Dakota, what are you going to do? So I don't know. but it seems like it may be headed in that direction unless the NFL fixes it.
Once again, it looks like the NFL is trying to move or is talking about moving the combine. And Minneapolis was on the short list of potential locations. How terrible would it be to do that in the middle of February in Minnesota?
Well, they learned during the Super Bowl, also in February, to not do that, but it's the part of the deal of getting a new stadium and being in the NFL is that you get to have a shot at these things. What's really tough is that like some of the cities that are like really cool to go to, like for the Super Bowl, like New Orleans, which they go to all the time for the Super Bowl, not great for the combine because you need to have a downtown medical facility that has all the machines that is easily accessible by hotels. And also you need to have event space all in one building like the convention center. By the way, it's the Indiana Convention Center, not Indianapolis. The Indiana Convention Center is enormous. It is huge. The combine takes up a fraction of it. It's interesting that it's that huge, but like that's, you would need that. New Orleans hosts a lot of stuff, so you'd think it would have it, but is it all centrally located? Is it all accessible by hotels? I don't know. So that's something to kind of keep in mind is that like a lot of these potential host cities may not have the specific infrastructure that the combine kind of demands, right? So, which is why it's always held in Indianapolis. Not only is it centrally located, which is convenient for a lot of people, but like literally the city is designed around central location of event hosting. It's phenomenal for it. So I don't know if that's easy to change, but Minneapolis in February, I mean, Indiana does have skyways and Minneapolis has more of them, and you would definitely need to use them.
Yeah, I'm just trying to envision like this winter being as hilariously warm as it's been. This is not the norm. Right. Some like ridiculous blizzard stranding everyone over at HCMC. That seems much more likely. Bob the Bull Sharif asks, for a Reef's 40-time corner, is there a causal relationship between how fast a person can run and how much they believe that space is imaginary and that the Earth is flat?
I am forced to believe that there is. I don't know about causal, but certainly there seems to be a correlation, right? Like obviously, I guess we technically didn't get Tyler Owens' 40 time, but he was projected to run in the 4.2s. He doesn't believe in space. Again, I was very confusing. I wrote about that sentence over at Wide Left when I talked about my all fun team. Because what does that mean? Not to believe in space. Like I get not believing that stars exist. I don't agree with it.
He clearly needs to be on the same play. He needs to be on the same team as Josh Dobbs. Like that's how that works.
That's perfect. That rules so much. God, I need it. I didn't think about that until just now. Incredible. Holy crap. What a great buddy cop show. Oh my God. But I mean, like there's it feels like a lot of the faster players in the NFL do like conspiracies. And then also some athletes in the NBA, that's a thing too. I'm forced to believe that this is the case, that there is a relationship. I don't know about causal. I don't think running fast it makes you believe it not in space, in that space is imaginary, but it's a relationship of some kind.
Can you imagine Josh Dobbs going up to him with like that like Dots ice cream, or astronaut ice cream, and like, here I have a special gift for you. It's like, what's an astronaut? Oh, come on, that's an Earth thing. I want this buddy cop movie so bad. Legend of Korra asks, what is really happening with the Meta outage? That happened around the time that I had asked for questions for the mailbag. It's possible the two are related.
I think that's the most likely conspiracy. So I believe it's back up. But there were like people who were like, oh, this is because of the election, which like, I don't know if you've been following the primaries, but there is no contest in either primary. I don't mean like literally, like literally Dean Phillips is running against Biden and Nikki Haley is running against Trump, but like practically there is no competition. I don't know what a Meta outage would do to change any of these outcomes at all. Oh, and for people who might be confused, Meta is Facebook. That's just, and also Instagram. I feel like not everybody knows that because that's stupid. Yeah. And it's fair that you don't know that.
Threads went down too. Tens of people were inconvenienced.
Oh, yeah, my influencers.
It's a darn shame. I'm sure somebody also tweeted that. I don't care. I'm stealing it.
Yeah, that's good. But yeah, I think it's more likely that James caused it than I don't know who would be caught. Russia? Sure. That seems more likely to me.
It's somehow related to the AT&T business. Let's go with that. Yeah. Arif Wazowski asks, how much did the NFL save by only needing to buy red and yellow confetti? Or are you stuck with the name? Because this has to be like the fourth or fifth time we've done the name, and it finally hit you.
It's the way that, I don't know, the way it just rolled off your tongue that time. All right, Arif. Arif Wazowski asks. Sometimes I do feel like I'm being covered up by a logo or the UPC code, which has to be one of the greatest jokes I've ever seen on the Walmart discount bin in Monsters Inc. The UPC code or whatever it's called, the barcode, was always over Mike Wazowski. It was like, that's intentional and that's hilarious. Oh my God. Incredible joke. Anyway, how much did I read? Probably not a ton, but it's not nothing. Maybe that's the conspiracy, that they rigged the games to minimize the amount of confetti they would have to buy.
That was the real thing that the people weren't looking into. Yeah, everyone was looking at the logo. No one was looking at the confetti.
By the way, speaking of, this is very stupid. So I was talking to some podcasters and video content creators,
as one does,
who create content about the NFL, and they had received an offer to work with the NFL a little bit, which would be nice because then you get to be like on the field for the combine, you get some behind the scenes access, you get better access to coaches and stuff like that. And then you'd also do like promotional material, right? Which, like, I don't know, does the NFL need advertising? Sure, why not? But like one of the things they mentioned was that you can't make jokes that the NFL is scripted. And I was like, hold on. The NFL ran a whole campaign, not like one ad, but like a series of ads about how it's scripted. Like, you can't. Are you serious? You're not allowed to make. Anyway, that's only if you're.
Their social media teams do that. Like, literally.
All the time.
Yeah. Literally NFL commercials. Money was spent. Kirk Cousins was wearing chains and shirtless for it.
Keegan-Michael Key wrote the script. That was the commercial.
Yes.
What? So just as an aside, it's crazy because like the way brands have inconsistent sensitivities is like mind-boggling to me. It's very upsetting. Anyway, there you go. That's a detail you have now.
Yeah. Pessimistic Minnesota sports fan asks, for Arif's negotiation tactics corner, the MLS has locked out its referees for the start of the season and is using replacement refs. Recently, they sent a letter to TV and radio broadcast partners with instructions to, quote, not belabor referee commentary and criticism during matches. As a fellow sports franchise owner, because you are a part owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, congratulations on your Super Bowl win, does Arif sympathize with the MLS owners and approve of their negotiation tactic of attempting to ban criticism of the replacement refs?
From my class position as an owner, I definitely agree. You have to put together a good product. It's a privilege to cover the MLS, and it's not a right; it's a privilege, and that privilege can be revoked at any time. People would love to have your job. I can't believe that you're complaining about your job. So you got to take it. That's my class position answer. As a at my job as a journalist, what in the world? That's crazy. I can't believe you. You can't. I can't. You got to be objective as a journalist. That's insane to me. I hate that. It bothers me a lot. Also on Twitter, I've seen these guys get absolutely hammered. So they must be doing a terrible job because people already don't like you might think people don't like NFL refs. And if you're an NBA Twitter, you're like, yeah, but NBA Twitter hates their refs more. And that's true. You're right. NBA Twitter does hate the refs more. And they've got more reason to. Probably the worst refs out of all the big four. But MLS, like soccer fans absolutely hate their refs. And, again, not like unjustified, but they hate their refs. So for them to be like, wow, these replacement refs are just like way, way, way worse. It seems pretty meaningful to me. So they must be doing something real bad. And enough that the MLS was like, hey, relax. Whoa, help us win this labor fight. It just doesn't feel like it's part of the job description as a journalist, but it doesn't stop a lot of people in the NFL media industry anyway. So no. Sure.
Tank B asks, for Reef's what if corner, now that Brock Purdy is certifiably not good, thanks to the most important stat, Super Bowl wins, does Kyle Shanahan regret not having Kirk?
Isn't Kirk also not? No, I'm not going to think about the internal inconsistency of the question because that's not important. Yes, deeply. He's so sad that he's pulling an Urban Meyer and just like eating pizza despondently in the tunnel.
Working with Dolphins, yeah. Also, the story that Schefter has been telling lately about how, as a result of not going for Kirk Cousins, the San Francisco 49ers picked up Brock Purdy. Like, the way all of that worked is insane to me. Like, the time of the chain of events and everything is just absolutely ridiculous. If you haven't heard it, it's worth listening to Schefter spend 2 minutes telling you about how the Patriots were desperate to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right, yeah. Well, Tom Brady was.
Well, yes. That's the real reason why things moved, but why they didn't end up going for Kirk Cousins. Also from Tank B, for a Reef's Restaurants of Middle America corner, we give Olive Garden a lot of flack, rightfully so, but is there a restaurant that seems more catered to people who would think that milk is too spicy than the Cheesecake Factory?
I feel like this is a kind of question that James has an answer just like off the dome without thinking about it. I'm really curious about that. Do you have a better answer than Cheesecake Factory?
I mean, my initial response to anything about a restaurant chain that I don't like ends up being Ruby Tuesday. So I would go Ruby Tuesday.
Actually, yes. That is a much better answer. So the Cheesecake Factory, I think the way, if you were to conceive of something called the Cheesecake Factory, I think it would answer your question in the affirmative. But like the actual Cheesecake Factory doesn't, I think, cater to people who think milk is too spicy. But it definitely does not cater to indecisive people. Oh my God. The menu is obscene, just in how big it is. Like there's no way any of this can be good, which, I mean, spoiler. But actually, that's a little too harsh. The avocado egg rolls were insanely good. They did not deserve to produce a good product, and they did. Also, the cheesecake itself is not bad, which is like great because you've got like 1,000 menu items, but you're named the Cheesecake Factory. You should nail the cheesecake. And I know you're distracted because you also have to make a steak and some tacos or whatever. But like the cheesecake is good. Gotta give them that. But the avocado egg rolls do have a little bit of kick to them. I don't recommend them because that means you're going there. But if you're already going there, if that's already part of the equation, you should probably get them. But don't go if you can choose not to. You'll be there forever just ordering.
There was a post in the Discord about one of our listeners going to was at the Cheesecake Factory, and somebody was wearing a Patrick Mahomes jersey. They're wearing their good one, the white, and there was a discussion in there
as to, for the occasion.
Exactly. There was a discussion as to whether or not it was okay to wear the jersey, and then it boiled down to, well, was it the home or the away? Was it the white or the red? Because I feel like the white kind of lends itself more to the situation. But like if you're wearing your red, like, I don't know, that's more of an at home or Walmart situation. I can't get behind that.
One thing I liked is that someone mentioned that the Cheesecake Factory is attempting to infuse every single culture into its menu and restaurant design. And I never really thought about it. But if you like look at the decor, you're like, where is this from? There is no place in the world that organically is like this. Like that is a Muslim arch, and that is a Russian onion dome, and that is just that's a Western saloon style door. Like, what are we doing here? It is like, once you see it, it's extremely uncomfortable how discordant it is. But also, then you open the menu and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, I can apparently get pizza here, right? Like, you know.
Like, at some point there will be sashimi, and that will
right, yeah.
The snake will eat its own tail. It'll be amazing. Also, for a Reese football question mark corner, would Adrian Peterson break the all-time rushing record for American ice football? We're going to include a link in the score in the show notes for this, but apparently American ice football is a thing, and everyone's really excited when they score a touchdown because that means they get to leave the ice.
Okay, first of all, so this is a great tweet. I encourage everyone to watch it, but I bet that it's not a thing, and it's just they made it for a sketch, which great bit. Good idea for a sketch.
If not, the Ocho. Built for the Ocho.
It's very built for the Ocho. And God, the touchdowns are great because, like, you know how like in gridiron football played on grass and or turf, like they'll just like, you know, they'll dive for the end zone, or like their ability to break tackles disappears once they're in the end zone. Like, obviously, that's not a criticism. Like, obviously, you know, players no longer have to put in effort to break tackles once they're in the end zone because they've done the thing, they scored. Like, the fact that you no longer have to put in effort because you've accomplished your goal looks cool in the NFL. Because you're like diving, or you get taken to the ground, or, you know, it looks like your final bit of strength is being used to extend the ball across the goal line when it's not your final bit of strength. But that's what it looks like. You're fighting for it, and it's a tiny narrative within the narrative of a football game that reaches a really satisfying natural conclusion. It's awesome. It's cool. It adds to the legend of players. If there's an opposite to that, that's what happens in ice football. Like, crossing the goal line is. It's almost like God made an accident, and you're just witnessing the result. And
guy slides slowly through. You know who'd be great at ice football? Jared Allen.
Oh, he'd rule at it. Also, like, he knows how to walk on ice.
Exactly.
Because
the curling thing.
The curling thing, and also, I was going to say the curling thing, and then I also realized he did bobsled too. So he's built for this.
Oh my! Yeah, this is right. Absolutely a sport for Jared Allen.
Can you imagine you're playing ice football in like your rec league of buddies that you're all falling over and you're stupid, and then Jared Allen is roaring off the edge as if there's no ice at all?
Exactly.
That would terrify me.
He's just ready for a fight. It's a Monday night. You're the Bucks. You're just going to have to deal.
You're Donald Penn. Surprise.
He is going to eat your lunch. You're just going to have to deal with it.
So him and Vernon Davis, who also does curling. That would be awesome. I think Adrian Peterson would do very poorly. He seems like a fish out of water in this scenario. Not just because he's from Texas, but also he is from Texas.
I'd kind of like to see him try to truck somebody.
Yeah, I mean, if as soon as he makes the slightest bit of contact, some guy is going to explode. But it's a tough road there. It's a tough road there.
Yeah, it's hard to get to that point. Room Bull Sharif asks, for Reef's Taxes Corner, are the long gaps between Norse Code episodes because you and James record an episode and then shelve it for tax purposes?
Okay, shelving is the wrong word because that would suggest that it exists somewhere. But were we to do this, we would delete the episode. just like the kind executives at HBO Max or HBO. Whatever.
I'd correct you, but now. I don't care. That's my co-host role today.
Yeah, right. I got mad because they were doing it, and now I'm mad because I don't even know the name of the thing anymore. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you imploding so much? And how is it that you produce something like Game of Thrones or there's a bunch of other stuff. They don't do Mad Men. That's AMC.
Barry.
Watchmen, Barry. Like, how can you do that? How can you produce like genuine art until like season 7 of Game of Thrones? But how can you produce like genuine art?
6 really, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like very fair. But also this. How do you not even know what you're called? Like, here's a lesson that Elon should have learned, and obviously didn't because duh. But like HBO was teaching him this lesson and he wasn't listening, right? Which is when you have an extraordinary brand where the name is its own cash, don't change it. Don't do that. Don't change it. Don't do that. Like Facebook is still called Facebook, right? Like it's the product is Facebook. The company is called Meta, and that's honestly unimportant, right? Like you can change the whatever. Like you probably shouldn't have changed your company name. I don't think that was smart, but it's not important because Facebook is Facebook. Twitter is X. That's stupid. HBO is HBO Max is Max. If like Max is the name of a guy, I know a Max, right? That's stupid. HBO is a brand. What are you doing? Anyway, that's like the 8th worst thing about HBO right now. And then Disney's doing this too. Fully produced.
Which number is the Velma series, by the way?
Oh God, that's got to be 5, 4, maybe. What in the world are you doing? That's so sad. Oh God, I'm sad again. Okay.
Yes, we're doing a Reef regression therapy again. This is awesome. Last time it was Star Wars, and now it's everything terrible about Max.
I was happy this episode. I said there was something that made me happy. I forget what it was. Now I'm sad.
It's all gone now.
It's all gone. Disney is like the worst. They fully produced movies. Like completely, like start to finish. Like it's not that you shot everything and then you didn't edit it together in a movie. You did do that, and it's not that you went through post production and post processing. You erased all the lines for the harnesses for your wire foo or whatever. You erased all the wires for your stunts, right? And you did the CG, and all your CG models are like finalized. They're fully textured. They look real. The light effects work. You've got ray tracing everywhere. It was very expensive. You put in all the work. The voice acting is done. It syncs with the lip movements in every language. In every language. You do all of it. All of it. And then you delete it. It's not that you refuse to release it, although you do also refuse to release it. You delete it. My heart hurts so much. And I don't care about the Wile E. Coyote movie. I don't. It's whatever. That part of Looney Tunes, not important to my childhood. It was kind of funny, and I learned slapstick comedy from it, probably more than most other Looney Tunes. I don't care. I don't really have an emotional attachment to it. Like, whatever. But the fact that it happened and keeps happening and always happens, good system. This is great system, everyone. That art only exists for consumption and profit. And if you can find a way to profit off of art by destroying it, that we're doing that too now. That cool. We've designed a smart tax system that removes liability for losses, and that's good actually. But we can't. The loophole. This is an impossible loophole. You could just decide that this would actually not make you money and mark it as a loss. The IRS is going to say no, you're wrong.
This is it.
Anyway, that's what happened in the Norse Code episodes.
Arif lost it. This is it finally happened. Arif can't handle it. So we're going to go to a question for me. For James's dating corner, how hot does someone have to be to share classified information with on a date?
Oh God, that tweet ruled. Oh my God. Did you see the text of the texts?
Yes, I did. So it was reported that a fellow was, and what's great is so this story broke, and I was hanging around with you don't really say former Marine, you say Marine. Chris, you had met him when you'd come up.
Oh yeah.
So cool. This story broke about this fellow who was going on a dating app and was texting this girl and was providing classified information about like people involved in NATO and all this stuff. And
like diplomatic movements,
yeah.
troop movements.
Yeah. So boy, can I read the text? Yes, I think you're required to at this point if we're reporting on this.
So this is I don't know if I'm using the right word, but I'm just saying it's in the deposition. It's in the case, right? Evidence 2. On or about March 11th. Dear, what is shown on the screens in the special room? It is very interesting. 3. On or about March 15th. By the way, you are the first to tell me that NATO members are traveling by train, and only now, already evening, this was announced on Our News. You are my secret informant, love. How are your meetings? Successfully? 4. On or about March 18th. Beloved Dave. This is how I refer to all of my dates. Beloved Dave.
All of them.
Do NATO and Biden have a secret plan to help us? 5. On or about March 23rd. Dave, it's great that you get information about specified country 1 first. I hope you will tell me right away. You are my secret agent. With love. 6. On or about April 12th. Sweet Dave, the supply of weapons is completely classified, which is great.
I'm talking. So this news comes out, and I was telling my buddy the Marine about it, and his response literally was, "We have to take classes on this. We have to take classes on honeypot situations to not get into this sort of thing." And this guy,
not at the Air Force.
Apparently not. They stop at Marine. They don't go to Air Force with it too. That is just
7.
Oh man.
On or about April 14th. Bye, Sweet Dave. Thanks for the valuable information. It's great that 2 officials from the USA are going to Kiev. 8. On or about April 19th. Dave, I hope tomorrow NATO will prepare a very unpleasant surprise for Putin. Will you tell me? 9. On or about April 21st. You have a job in the operations center today. I remember. I'm sure there's a lot of interesting news there. Look, you don't need a class. This is the most like they should take the classes. Let me be clear. But like, if you needed a class to hey, do you have classified info for me, my beloved?
It's either this or the waifu.
My secret agent.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is how like obviously she has to be a looker, right? Like she has to be extremely hot. But like also, how down bad do you have to be?
I bet there's not even a chance they ever met. This was absolutely like one of those like online like the girlfriend that doesn't exist sort of situation. Like no,
100%.
Yeah.
But like your blood has to be running crazy hot for you to be like, yeah, this makes sense. I gotta do this. 'Cause like telling your wife of 12 years some of this stuff is wrong. You can't do that. And that's obvious. And we all know that, right? Telling your online, maybe fling is the wrong word, but like telling a woman that you met on Ukrainian Tinder, which might be Tinder. I should be fair there. But like, Tinder in Ukraine, that is a whole level. Like you didn't, at least in the wife of 12 years scenario, you like trust them. Vetting is the wrong word, right? You're past vetting. You know everything about them inside and out. You've met their parents. They've got a whole backstory that like checks out, right? I've seen enough like Alias, Quantico, whatever, to know that the way that you deceive someone for 12 years in a marriage is to build a whole life and employ a frankly unbelievable number of secret agents to convince your subject that the person they're married to has like a great aunt or something, right? Like that, like it's like there's a lot. You do 12 years is a lot of time for someone to be undercover. Fine, great. They tricked you. A lot of effort, worth it. Nothing. She didn't have to do anything. She was just like, hey, I'm hot. And also you have secret info. Classified secrets? Classified secrets tonight? Classified secrets tonight, King? Like, come on. What are you doing?
This is, I mean, it's a sad story. And she would have to, I can't even describe the amount of, I'd have to meet her. And that's the problem. That's why this thing would fall apart. Because I would actually require meeting them. Patrick O'Neill asks, for the beekeeping corner, when is the best time for the Vikings to properly harness the power of bees using the three bees in a bag charm? Typically, this is the most potent in late August, just before the regular season, or should this be completed in July during training camp?
Three bees in a bag charm?
I mean, as a well-established bee professional, I feel like you should have heard of this particular.
Oh, I 100% have. I definitely didn't just Google it now using the copy paste search function.
I didn't see you use that on the show notes at all.
menus.
No, that's absolutely not what I saw.
Yeah, so that's not what happened. I mostly my response was mostly because I was shocked at how learned our listeners are and how incredible they are at pulling essential pieces of bee lore. Anyway, according to 366.wordpress.com, an authoritative bee site if I've ever heard one. This particular charm, which you can find in museums across England, especially in the Dawlish Witchcraft Museum in Devon, England. It's a faded, what they have on display is a faded blue drawstring bag, and it has the bodies of 3 dead bumblebees. And the idea is that it's hung in the quote unquote best room of the house. It brings health, happiness, and sweet good fortune. So in preparation for this, I did actually Google the wrong thing before the show, which is, when are bees most potent? I just felt like that would get us all the way there where we needed to. And it says early spring. So I don't know if it changes if the bees are dead or inside a bag. Maybe that's in August. But my understanding is early spring. And that's tough. That's right now. The Vikings need to get their bees in a bag right now. That sounds like such a good euphemism for like hurrying up. Hey,
get your bees
in the bag. Let's go. Yeah.
You got to do the old timey thing too. Hey now, you got to get your bees in those bags.
The broads are waiting.
The bingoists are here to collect your bees in the bag.
But yeah, Patrick, I'm impressed at your bee knowledge that I shared and could answer for you.
Yes. Cody asks, for a Reef's metric system corner, what's the most caffeine a Reef has drank in one day? And was it over 1,000 milligrams? Of course it was over 1,000 milligrams.
It's clearly, there's multiple days where I go over 1,000 milligrams. Like, it's at least weekly. There's a day that I go over 1,000 milligrams. So I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast before. James doesn't seem to remember it, and he has a much better memory for the things I say in the podcast than I do. But in 7th grade, I absolutely overdosed on caffeine in like an irreparable way, except I'm still alive. And probably should not be. This is a long episode, but here's another long story. So in 7th grade, I'm in orchestra, right? And to celebrate a successful concert, our orchestra captains, which I don't know what that's about. I don't know. What does an orchestra captain do? Don't know. This apparently just make bad decisions for the rest of us. I decided to celebrate by getting all of us like coffee drinks from Caribou. We're in 7th grade. Coffee drinks from Caribou. Orchestra was like the first class of the day, so you'd start your day with, I guess, a coffee drink. I don't know. And so they bring them, and then they bought a drink tailored to each of us by what they imagined we would like. Again, none of us have had like coffee, so we don't know, and they can't know. They haven't also had they hadn't had a latte by then, right? Like that's just not a thing that we did. And so they just like guessed at the things that we would like. And mine was an espresso, which let me tell you, as a 7th grader, not wonderful. Not a fan of espresso when I was in 7th grade. That's stupid. Don't buy a 7th grader espresso. If they like espresso, you have real problems. You got to get that kid looked at because they're probably drinking way too much coffee because they're drinking any coffee. That's nuts to me. Or there's other problems with their taste buds and they might enjoy poisons. Poisons are bitter. That's a concern. So, I had an espresso. I drank it. I pretended to like it. Great. The thing is, there were people with stronger minds than I in that orchestra. And when they didn't like the thing, they stopped drinking it, which is wonderful. We need more people like that. And I offer to drink all of it. Every single time someone didn't finish their drink, they had like a sip and they didn't like it, I had it. I had lattes and mochas and black coffees and espressos. And I can't count how many I had. I had so many. I had at least 5 mochas. I had at least 4 lattes. I had at least 3 shots of espresso, which at a place like Caribou or Starbucks is a double shot because they only pull double shots because that's just what a chain restaurant or chain coffee place does. Okay? The lattes and the mochas and the macchiatos and all that have multiple shots of espresso in them. That's how you make a coffee drink, right? So I had so many and I couldn't feel my body, right? Like as we were leaving class to go to biology, I had a presentation that day, which I didn't have to actually, but it was shot on video beforehand. So I would just be standing awkwardly in the front along with my 2 other group mates while the video plays. I don't know why we had to stand, but sure, fine. But I was like nervous because a live presentation I'm comfortable with. Even in 7th grade, I was like, I am great at speaking in front of people, but a video I was just nervous about, right? And I told my partners on the way to class that I was nervous, and they were like, well, obviously. And I was like, what? Like, I'm not usually nervous. Like, what do you mean, obviously? It's like, look at you. And my hands were just tapping, like all my fingers were like tapping various parts of my body, like my arm, the back of my neck, my shoulders. My hands were moving without me noticing.
It really was the fry with 99 cups of coffee.
99 cups of coffee, because I did not traverse time. Time did not stop, I guess. And I was like, oh my God. And I was so nervous about the presentation, I pretended to be sick and got out of class and went to the nurse's office. And the thing was, I was actually sick. I'm sure this shocks none of you, right? I was actually sick. So I go to the nurse's office and she's like, what's up? And I was like, I had too much coffee. And she's like, any coffee is too much coffee. You're like 80 pounds. Like that. You should not be having any coffee. I'm upset that they have Coke in this building. What are you doing drinking coffee? And I was like, no. You don't understand. You might think one coffee is too much coffee. I'm not here to disagree with that. I had what is way too much coffee for anyone. And I explained how much I drank. And she was like, how are you this stupid? She said those words. How are you this stupid? Great nurse. 5 out of 5 would recommend. And she's like, we are calling the hospital. And I was like, what? Yeah, the hospital. And then after that, you are calling your parents. I was like, in that order? And she's like, yeah, hospital comes first. And I was like, okay, great. So call the hospital. And my parents pick me up and go to the because she was like, do I call poison control? Like, it was just very, so my parents take me to the hospital. The doctor's like, well, you're alive. He said that. He said, well, you're alive. to a 7th grader. What?
Arif became bulletproof on this particular day if you're looking for the origin story.
and the fact that I was alive set him at ease, because I guess I'd be dead by now if it was a problem. and he was like, have you gone to the bathroom yet? And I was like, no, oh God, where's the bathroom? I hadn't, and it hadn't occurred to me. And then suddenly I really needed to go. So I had to run to the bathroom. It's something else when you can like see the liquid level of a toilet change. Like there was a lot going on. Come back and he's like, did you get it all out? And I was like, yeah. What, you think I stopped halfway? I didn't actually say that part, but you know, what a weird question. Did you get it all out? And then I had to go to the bathroom again. So I guess great question. So I go to the bathroom again and he's like, okay, we'll take him home. And he can't have caffeine for like the next couple of months. And she's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Chocolate has a small amount of caffeine in it. He can't have chocolate, much less Coke. And I was like, what? What? I can't have chocolate? That's crazy. And he's like, would you want to live? And I was like, okay, this doctor is something else, man. What are we doing? and I don't know if he said, do you want to live? But it was something along the lines of like, come on, man. And I was like, okay. And my mom does not take me back home. That would have been smart. She takes me back to school. She's like, well, school is still happening. So you're going to go to school. You're not
the doctor told you you're alive.
It's duly noted by the doctor. Yeah. So it seems like you can still attend class. You're attending class. And I was like, I don't love this. Go to the hospital and I still have to go to school. So go to school. It's like the last class. It felt like so stupid. But I did have football practice. So I was going to be there for longer. So I go to football practice. And we do kind of the warm-ups and stuff like that. We're moving equipment around. And it was like kind of tough to move the equipment, but fine. As we're doing push-ups, I'm looking down at my hand and there is a pool of blood on my hand. And I'm like, what is up with that? That's crazy. And I follow the line of blood and there is a deep gash in my forearm and I cannot feel it. I can't, nothing. I'm not sensing any pain at all. And it's deep and there's a lot of blood. And I tell the coach, like, hey, seems like a problem. And he's like, oh my God, go to the nurse's office. And I was like, oh, geez.
Part 2.
Yeah, so I go back and she's like, what are you still doing here?
Like,
Did you go to the hospital?
Look, you don't know my mom, all right?
Yeah, it was like my mom brought me back. And she was like, what? Why would she do that? And I was like, ask her, man. Do you think I wanted to come back? Actual conversation we actually had. Do you think I wanted to come back? And then she saw my arm. And she's like, holy crap, what did you do now? And I was like, okay, this one is, I don't think, my fault. and she wraps it up. And she calls my mom again. And first of all, she like yells at my mom for bringing me back after I like overdosed on caffeine. But then two, she's like, also, your son cut himself. This is probably related to all the caffeine. And my mom is just like rascals when she picks me up. She's like, Arif, you rascal. And it's like, I deeply endangered myself twice today. And anytime I had, and obviously like I couldn't sleep, my sleep schedule was destroyed. I became super distracted for like the next 10 days, which maybe the next 20 years, who's to say? And it was bad. My mental state was awful, right? But also anytime I had any caffeine for like a couple of years, I would just get sick. I would just get the sick reaction, right? Which is one reason I started really liking root beer a lot. Like I was a huge root beer guy. Aside from Barks, root beer just doesn't have caffeine, right? So, And I didn't really make the connection between the two until like pretty recently when I told this story a couple of years ago to someone. I was like, wait a minute. And they're like, wait, you didn't have Coke for years? I was like, no, I did. I didn't have a lot of it. Mostly I had root beer. And I was like, wait, I think I know why I mostly had root beer. But yeah, it was just for the next couple of years, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. So it was like, it was bad. And if I had a lot of caffeine for the next couple of years after that, I would have a sick reaction. So by the time I got into college, I was deep in the caffeine sauce again. And so I would, again, have a ton of caffeine, this time without getting sick. I think I built up a tolerance, probably. But yeah, I regularly have at least 600 milligrams in a day, every day. And it often goes up above 1,000. So don't do that. It's bad. James actually knows the consequence. Despite the story I just told, James knows the consequences of having too much caffeine far more than I do, actually.
I had to stop having it altogether. Yeah. It's unfortunate.
It can get real bad. Don't do it.
Yeah. Let's I don't even know how to go more.
It's a long story.
We're going to do just a couple more questions. Kenneth Allen asks, for the Beekeeper Corner, one underrated aspect of the movie is that it's essentially John Wick with bees, as a man goes on a revenge quest, murdering his way to the top to kill an annoying son of a powerful person. Giving this
spoilers? I don't know if that's in the trailer or not, because you didn't let me watch trailers.
Yeah. Given this and given the franchise potential of Beekeeping World, how would you design a Beekeeper 2? Would the world building of the sequel feature different beekeepers, say perhaps an Italian beekeeper or a Russian beekeeper? Could we see a potential beekeeper race war?
Okay. First of all, at the level of humans, a race war is not one European against another European. Semantically. It's not my job to identify what is an appropriate race war. I think that's outside the bounds of Norse code. But I think we can all agree that one's probably not it, right? Obviously, on a B level, that is that, right? Like, that is that. So if it was Italian bees versus Russian bees, yeah, you could make that the kind of the conceit of the movie. But it's really important to know that in Beekeeper, there's just not a lot of bee knowledge. There's not a lot of bee action. The most you learn about bees is in the opening crawl.
Well, despite and maybe this is just because I've seen it more recently than you have, since I subjected another human being to it. But they had that like Beekeeping for Beekeepers book that they kept referencing throughout the whole movie,
which had beekeeping knowledge in it. It wasn't like so it's two things. One, it's a secret guide for the secret agents of beekeepers or whatever, right? But it is also literally beekeeping advice, right, James? Am I right about that?
No, this is accurate.
Yeah. It's both of those things, which feels like a very inefficient way to write a book. But okay. So yeah,
sometimes you
think
show up
learn...
to a gas station with a Gatling gun. Like this is just how this works.
Yeah, well, I mean, she was a beekeeper, right? That's
the replacement, yeah.
Yeah. I felt like they hyped that one up a lot, and from a hype to quality ratio, that was a bit of a disappointment.
Well, no, because they mentioned that she's a loose cannon and is an absolute wreck.
She did operate like one. She did meet her characterization in that respect. I just felt like she'd be a tougher fight. That's all.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah,
for more hard-hitting analysis of the movie, check out the bonus episode.
Yeah, we broke it down. But yeah, I think that the natural progression of these kinds of movies is that the sequel goes global, right? That you focused on the United States. It is technically a global-ish conspiracy.
I mean,
because it deals with the halls of power.
John Wick 2 was exactly like that.
Right. You go global. So yeah, I think you would have Italian beekeepers and Russian beekeepers, but the animus here is nationalist, not racist, necessarily. I mean, it doesn't take a lot for movies to become racist, but I think the motivating factor for movies being race is like either very specifically the point or not happening at all. Generally.
Yeah.
So
let's go to Logan Bolsharif, who asks, question for Arif's child language corner.
What?
My 3.5-year-old has sworn a couple times when they've immediately copied what I said. In those situations, we ignore and don't comment on it, as supposedly that is what you do so they don't repeat it. Don't give a reaction. Today, he learned how to use it correctly, independent of mom and dad. His younger brother threw his cup on the floor, and he said, "Effin' brother." My wife asked, "What did you mean when you said that?" So I asked, "What does he think the word means?" And he said, "When someone throws a cup or something, you say effin'," which is kind of correct. What do we do now?
Well, I mean, the thing about the children picking up swear words is that your immediate concern is not whether or not they're using them correctly. Like, it's notable that they won't use them correctly, but like, that's not the immediate deal. Like, you just don't want it normalized in their language, right? For whatever reason, right? So the fact that he kind of nailed the context clues on that one, not really that important. like that was going to happen eventually. I don't know when kids become unreasonably defiant. So this advice, it has to take that fact into account. But generally, my understanding is if not the way no matter how I say this, I'm going to sound stupid and wrong. So I'm not, okay, rewind. Probably just sit the kid down and explain calmly and slowly that you don't use that kind of language. I know that sounds very stupid and simplistic, but I think it's different because a lot of times when kids are defiant, again, I'm guessing, it's because you are denying them something that they really want. And so when you say no, they become even more defiant because you're making them uncomfortable or whatever, right? And here, it's not really that. I don't know that the kid has a deep desire to say it. Obviously, as soon as you center a conversation around it, they're going to form some pretty strong opinions pretty quickly. But like, it seems like it's already here. And so the best you could do is handle it. And all you can do is be like, "Hey, kiddo." Kids love being called kiddo, right? That's my understanding of watching Leave It to Beaver.
That is where you get most of your parenting information. It's true.
Yeah. But, just like, don't tell them that they're bad or wrong or make them feel like they're bad. It's like, "Hey, we don't want to say that. It sucks to say that." Don't use the word sucks. I think that's important too. But, just kind of be like, "Hey, it hurts people when we say that. We just kind of don't want to hurt people."
And then explain that hurt people hurt people. And that's
hurt people. Yeah.
I end up in the situation with an 11-year-old having to remind him that while I do the thing where, like, his mom curses way more than I do, which, if you know me outside of the podcast world, is impressive. But
it's impressive, but also I'm like familiar with the other person. So
yeah,
I get it.
But when it comes to actually like when it comes to like being around the kid, I make it so that when dad swears, it means something. Like, "Oh, dad's really upset. Like, this really did something."
Right,
like, yeah,
right. It's like it's a huge emphasis, and it feels rare-ish.
Yeah, my dad did the same thing, and so you become your parent. So that's just what I ended up doing. So I end up having to kind of do the whole like you
model the behavior. Yeah,
yeah. So he ends up kind of like with me anyway. I've tried to remind him, like, if we're watching a movie or something, or something like where there's a bunch of cursing, he's at the age now where you don't like purposefully avoid it, but you don't like try to draw attention, but you do try to say, when you use the word every other word, then it makes you look like an idiot. Like when it's all you say, it ends up taking the place for other words. So you end up having to like go that route and try to appeal to logic, which appealing to the logic of an 11-year-old is when you know things have gone wrong. But that's where I end up going. Dusty has submitted a question.
Great.
And asks, a coworker in their mid-20s insists that Helen Keller isn't real.
Oh, boy.
Their argument centers around the belief that that without any auditory or visual awareness, it would not be possible to establish a foundation for language. What do I do? So,
okay.
I first, like, the fact that the person isn't real is, like, the first question I would have about, like, this. Like, documented evidence
Helen Keller is extremely well documented because she became an activist later in life and stayed in the public eye, right? Like Helen Keller became a socialist activist for labor rights, which isn't to say that like everything she did was cool. She also advocated for eugenics. I do want to point out that in a very technical sense, eugenics didn't mean then what it means now, but it wasn't great. Like it wasn't good. So I want to celebrate that. But like, she's a very, very well documented person whose experience with disability and interacting with other people who had experienced disability led her to the conclusion that a lot of disability in American society and probably society at large is a product of capitalism, and especially like in factories and stuff like that. Like people would lose eyesight because of chemicals or lose limbs because of machines.
The days before it wasn't Animal Farm. The days before The Jungle, Upton Sinclair.
Right, exactly.
The days before that book came out.
Yeah. And so like that, like a very well documented person, right? So like Helen Keller definitely exists. The better conspiracy should be that she was faking it the whole time, because you're not going to win that she doesn't exist. Clearly existed. That's just, you can't get around that. On video, right? Can't get around that. But also, she was probably not faking it. Like, that almost certainly wasn't faking it. Because, like, all language is an agreed upon method of communication. That's all it is. It's a way to communicate ideas. And she did experience input. She could touch. That's, in fact, the whole deal with the famous play, right, is that she could touch. And so the teacher would teach her, like, how to sign for water, and then use the physical sensation of water to reinforce that that's what this means. That's all it is. Like language isn't words. Words are language. And by that, I mean words are a concept to atomize our communication so that we can express specific ideas, right? So language is just the method by which we communicate ideas, and words are a tool inside that subset. So you don't need words for something to be language. Like words are just one part of language. Body language doesn't have words. But when you're angry and you frown, you've communicated something, which is why that's called body language. So that's a stupid conspiracy. It is possible. Of course, it's very difficult because our whole construct of society is built around the way most people communicate most of the time. This is why there's like a social model for disability, that disability only exists in the context of how we design our society. If everyone was wearing if everyone needed wheelchairs, needing a wheelchair wouldn't be a disability because we design our buildings and systems and everything else around. Like, that's the social model of disability. This is like the same thing, right? The only reason that Helen Keller, it's hard to believe that she could communicate, is because our understanding of communication is conditioned by some very specific sensory inputs that we're used to using. But she still had sensory inputs. Like, she got hungry, she could feel things. This is stupid. And it was like a viral tweet. I think a lot of people decided to believe this because of a viral tweet like a couple months ago.
This is where a Vikings podcast goes in the offseason, folks.
Like we never do this during the regular season.
No, right. Absolutely not. This is absolutely famously. We stay on on task the whole time. Don from Ohio emerged from his cave to ask a question. For a reef in the famous caves of Ohio,
right.
For a reef in James' relationship corner, my wife recently had gastric bypass surgery a few weeks ago, and she's only able to eat a quarter of the food she used to. Should I make her pay for half the grocery bill still?
This is so brilliantly worded. Dawn has a gift for trolling. Oh my gosh. Don't you have like a joint account? Actually, I would be very concerned if they had a joint account.
Well, considering the question he asked that I didn't answer, or that I didn't put in the show notes, would have been about that. So no. here's the thing. As somebody who knows about this particular procedure, she's probably on a whole bunch of like shakes and like things like that they are selling to her directly. So she's not eating any of the food likely from the grocery store, or if she is, it's like it's incredibly small amount. So no, Dawn, this is on you. Congratulations, you're paying for yourself again.
It's incredible how infuriating his questions are and how he seems to continue to find new ways to be a bad husband or prior to the wedding boyfriend. Again and again.
We're just
if
learning.
You're listening to this, Dawn's wife, please leave him for your own good.
We're just learning time and time again about the power of enemies.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing here. And with that, this is the end of this episode of Norse Code. Hope you've learned something today.
I hope you had a lot of time. Glad you finished it. Jesus.
This is it for this episode. Arif, what do you have to plug?
Yeah, so over at Wide Left, which has changed to wideleft.football, which rules, I think. Over at wideleft.football, you can find 2 pieces I wrote recently, which are 1, that the NFL Combine is dying, discuss that a little bit, and 2, the all-fun NFL Combine team. So it's not like who had the best combine, like, 3-cone matters a lot for edge rushers, so we're going to identify the guy who had the best 3-cone, whatever, I don't care. It's going to be the most fun combine. And then also Luke published, or I published for Luke, I guess technically, a piece breaking down the Oregon offense and how pre-snap read works in lieu of having to actually watch Bo Nix play, which I understand that. So now the top 6 quarterbacks, Luke has a piece on all of them, a trait from all of them. Pocket presence or pocket management from Drake May, drop back footwork for Jaden Daniels, the scramble drill and the rules for the scramble drill for Caleb Williams, stuff like that. So check that out over at wideleft.football. It's been a while since we've recorded, so there are a bunch of other articles there. But those are the most recent or the most relevant to stuff that's happening right now.
And with that is it for this episode. Again, we'll be back here soon, probably in the next 2 weeks or so. And there'll be a bonus episode up on Patreon here shortly. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that the real power is through the power of enemies. And we'll be back soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.